Thanks everyone and welcome to the 2021 Health Hackathon launch event. It is such a beautiful day here and we're really happy to have everyone for coming along, so thank you. I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country to commence today's proceedings. I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, the WADSIH people of the Noongar Nation, and pay respect to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd like to extend a special welcome to Dr. Deb Cousins, the Executive Director of Science and Innovation at WADSIH, and Professor Chris Moran, Deputy Vice-Chancellor of Research at Curtin University. We'd also like to thank Mira English and Tankstream Labs for hosting us here today, and thanks to Alicia Fairbank and Kate McGilvray from WADSIH for organising this event and the hackathon itself. So I'd like again to thank our hackathon partners, who are AWS, MTP Connect WA Life Sciences Innovation Hub, the Telethon Kids Institute and the UWA Data Science Club. We'd also like to thank Innovation Central Perth and Perth Biodesign, who are supporting this event. So we've got so many clinicians, medical researchers, healthcare professionals and data custodians who have given up their own time to work with us over the last few months. And I think their enthusiasm and willingness to go above and beyond demonstrates the sort of the powerful desire for innovation in the WA healthcare sector. It's really exciting, and for an organisation such as ourselves, it's just fantastic to have so many people helping out young students and professionals come up with the next big thing. We have over 70 participants working across 18 challenges. They'll be assisted by 20 domain experts, be it clinicians, medical researchers and other health professionals. And we've got people from both the public and the private healthcare service providers, and we're really excited that everyone's working together. So during the week, the participants will have the opportunity to meet with their domain experts for a Q&A, access and start to play with their data using an AWS account, and attend training sessions on design thinking and innovating in the WA healthcare ecosystem, and use their AWS account to analyse data, build models and prototype. So for those of you who might not be aware what a hackathon is, we have a number of teams from our participants who will come together. They'll be given challenges and also data sets, and these are often real data sets that have been provided by the healthcare community, and they will sit down and they will work hard to come up with ideas, prototypes, pitches that we can then take to our judging panel. So it's a really exciting time and a really exciting way for people to come together and do some hard work and hopefully get a result. So during the hackathon, participants will also have access to virtual advice and guidance from the AWS APAC Healthcare and Life Sciences Industry Business Unit. So they've offered to support the teams on a range of topics related to their healthcare challenge and the application of AWS technology to that particular challenge. So these people work on a daily basis with our healthcare and life science customers across the region and can apply healthcare industry expertise and customer knowledge to AWS technologies. So over the weekend, participants will have access to the eZone Student Hub at UWA, where they'll be able to collaborate and explore innovative solutions to their healthcare challenge. So AWS specialists and clinical experts will be on site to provide advice and guidance where needed. Then on Sunday, each team will have the opportunity to pitch their solution to a judging panel of industry experts who will judge based on the viability, innovation, design principles, social impact and scalabilities of their solutions. So WADSIH and our supporting partners AWS and Perth Biodesign will then provide support to the winning team to help turn their idea into a reality. So this is just not a competition for competition's sake. We're actually looking to take one of the teams forward and help turn their idea into something real. So it's very exciting. We've got some fantastic speakers today, and I'd like to firstly introduce Professor Jonathan Karapetis. Professor Karapetis is the Director of the Telethon Kids Institute in Perth. He is also Professor at UWA and Consultant Paediatrician at Perth Children's Hospital. His research interests include rheumatic fever and rheumatic heart disease, other Group A strep diseases, vaccine-preventable diseases, Indigenous child health, child development and education, youth health and education, and skin sores and scabies. Professor Karapetis undertook his medical training at the Royal Melbourne and Royal Children's Hospitals. Previous positions included terms as Theme Director at the Murdoch Children's Research Institute in Melbourne and Director of the Menzies School of Health Research at Darwin. So if everyone could join me in welcoming Professor Karapetis. Thank you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. Fabulous turnout. I'm delighted to be at this event. I think I was involved in some of the judging last year, and it's a kind of the new way of working that I think we're trying to encourage at Telethon Kids Institute as well. Let me also acknowledge that we are on the land of the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and to acknowledge elders past and present. Telethon Kids Institute, for those who don't know, we're the largest medical research institute in Western Australia. We've been around for 31 years, founded, of course, by Fiona Stanley. I've been there for about 9 years. And over that 9 years, we've grown considerably. We're now about 1,200 staff and students. And we, of course, have moved during that time. About 3 or so years ago, we moved into the Perth Children's Hospital from our previous home base in Subiaco. And over that time, we've also expanded our programs of research quite considerably, and are hoping to make the most of being in that clinical environment at Perth Children's Hospital. But it's important that you know also that we're not just a hospital-based research organisation. In fact, our roots are very much in community-based research. And we continue to have not just the current headquarters at Perth Children's, we maintain a presence at our previous building in Subiaco, but we also have a site up in the Kimberley. We have Telethon Kids Kimberley in Broome. We are building currently, or we're expanding currently into the Pilbara with sites in Port Hedland and in Newman. We have an office in Adelaide that again is expanding, and then also within the Perth suburbs where we have a facility down in Coburn, and we'll be expanding into the other parts of the Perth suburbs as well, which is really designed to try and make sure that we can connect with community as much as possible. And a lot of that is built around health service connections, and so increasingly we try and conduct our research in a streamlined way together with health service delivery as a way of making sure that we can both incorporate research into service delivery, but also as a translation mechanism to get some of our research findings out into the hands of kids and families, the people who can hopefully benefit from it the most. Today I just wanted to spend a couple of minutes talking about a couple of themes that are emerging from the way that we're working at Telethon Kids that might, I guess, on the surface seem a bit contradictory, but come to the new way of working. And in order to do that, let me just give you a sense, for those of you who aren't academics, about how academic research, how it works globally, but particularly in this country. And it's really that idea of traditionally we're taught as academics that we want to become independent researchers. What does that mean? It means that you want to develop your skills, you want to become the person who asks the questions, who gets the dollars, employs the staff to then answer those questions. And that's been a fantastic way of operating, and it's got us the amazing breakthroughs that we've seen through medical research. But I also think it's increasingly seen as an inefficient way of doing our research, and it also doesn't necessarily make the most of the skills of the researchers collaborating with others, whether they be community members, whether they be industry, whether they be policymakers. And what we're trying to do at Telethon Kids is to embrace a much more of a team science, a way of doing our research. And some of the paradigms that are being challenged include that traditional scientific method. So what is scientific method? Scientific method is you see a problem, you come up with a hypothesis about what could be the reason for that problem, or what could be the answer to that question, and then you test your hypothesis. You actually try and disprove your hypothesis. It's very difficult to prove, but you can certainly disprove. And then that usually gets you to a point where you've decided, yes or no, I have disproved my hypothesis, and then you move on to the next question. And it's this kind of incremental way of progressing our research, and it has served us well. It's the way I was trained. But it's been interesting over the last few years at a place like Telethon Kids, where we've really, like many of in fact, like probably all of the research organisations around the world, are trying to embrace what's happened with big data science, with I guess artificial intelligence, with also the whole concept of the next generation sequencing revolution, where we've got more data than we've ever imagined in the past, and we can really delve into that data. So I trained as an epidemiologist, and I was told that data mining is a bad thing. Now I'm told it's a good thing, and that's a real challenge for someone like me. To say, and I've got some of my researchers, I'm not sure if some of them are in the room, but they who tell me, just get over it, Jonathan. This is the new way of doing research. Let the data tell you what's happening, and explore that data and take an unbiased approach. And that's been difficult, because it's made me realise that every time I've gone in with my traditional scientific methods, I've brought my own biases, my own hypotheses, and those inevitably colour the way my research is done. And so I'm trying to embrace this new science, and I don't necessarily tell you that I'm fully converted, but I'm on the way. And so let me give you an example. I work in a disease called rheumatic fever. Rheumatic fever is a huge problem in the Aboriginal population. It's a big problem around the world. And it's a disease that we don't really know the cause of. We kind of have a sense. We know what the bug is that causes it. We don't really understand the black box between getting an infection with this bug and then getting this disease called rheumatic fever. We don't have a really good way of diagnosing it. We haven't made any therapeutic advances in about 60 or 70 years, which is quite bizarre. And so what I've realised is that my 30-odd years of researching rheumatic fever has made some incremental gains. But what my researchers are telling me is, let the new science tell you what's going on. And so we're in the middle of a big project where we're enrolling people with rheumatic fever in Darwin and in New Zealand and in Uganda. And we're enrolling a whole lot of people who don't have rheumatic fever, who have other conditions that could be confused with rheumatic fever. And then what we're doing is we're just doing everything on them. We're running every omics you can imagine on them. And now we're kind of in the middle of getting those data in, and now I'm going to ask my data scientists to try and tell me what the patterns are. And out of that, I'm hoping we're going to, and what I've told them is what I want is a diagnostic test, and I want a therapeutic. I want you to tell me what sort of therapeutic we could target for this disease. That's been quite challenging. I can tell you that some of the researchers that we're working on as part of this collaboration are similarly challenged, because they're wanting to target a particular molecule that they think is important. And we're saying, yes, we will target that molecule, but we'll also make sure that there are every other molecule we're looking at. And that's the kind of revolution that we're going through as scientists, that we're trying to embrace at Telethon Kids Institute, which is to really say, if we want to be an even more important and impactful research organisation, if we want to truly make a difference at a scale we haven't been able to until now, then we have to be willing to think differently. We have to be willing to embrace new ways of doing our science. Which brings me to the last point I wanted to make, which is the stuff that you guys see as your bread and butter, which is innovation. I would argue, and I've talked to my institute about this, I would argue that our research system, our academic research system in this country, is actually not set up well for innovation. Why do I say that? Because when we write our grant applications every year, when we as chief investigators write those applications, we send them into Canberra to the National Health and Medical Research Council. They get reviewed by our peers. The person next to you might be reviewing your grant, and they will be reviewing them based on the criteria which in the end come down to, are you really good enough to do it, and do we think it will succeed? Now, would you really, if you wanted to change the world, judge a research project on whether or not you think it's going to succeed? It's a bizarre concept, but that actually is one of the ways that science is funded in this country. And so what I'm trying to do is to, within that system, encourage my researchers not to play it safe, which is how research often works in this country. Incremental science, where you think someone will say, yeah, it's not going to change the world, but we think they can do that project. Researchers will see that as the safest way to get a grant. And I don't blame them at all. What we're trying to do is try within that system to foster a different way of thinking for academic research, which is not a different way of thinking probably for most of you or for those of you who are in business, which is take a risk, be willing to fail fast. And I'm really keen through events like this for us to be able to incorporate that way of thinking into the way an academic research organisation functions. Sorry, your computer's okay, I didn't. So that's why I think this sort of event is fabulous, because out of what you guys are going to do in the next week, I'm imagining there's going to be some great ideas, and some great ideas that are going to help Western Australia to solve some really wicked problems. We need to take advantage of what we've got in this state. We've got the potential particularly with a current government that's so focused on research, focused on innovation, that's putting some dollars into it, to really embrace the concept of a learning healthcare system. Never been able to achieve that before. Could we do it in this state? To really embrace that integration between the academic scientist, the clinical environment, and hopefully the kind of biotech and innovation and industry sectors. I would hope that this is the sort of thing that's going to really put Western Australia on the map in the future. I do think we can do it differently. Why? Aside from the mindset we have in Western Australia, the ecosystem in Western Australia, we don't have that same level of kind of, how would I put it, the backstabbing culture that you get over on the east. We're nicer people. We like to collaborate, and we find that that's a real selling point for Western Australia. So I wish you well. I love being at this sort of thing, and I'm very keen to see what comes out of it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think you're right. I think, to update a phrase for 2021, there are lies, damn lies, and data mining. So you have to be really careful. These are so powerful, these techniques, and finding active research and the correct path using these techniques is really important. So that's fantastic. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Sarah Bassett. Sarah is part of the ANZ executive team at Amazon Web Services, leading the WA and SA region as well as the resources vertical. Her team works with enterprises across all industries in Perth and Adelaide to help them realise the value of cloud technology from both an economic and business transformation perspective. She's passionate about technology innovation and providing education to enable customers to create a culture of change and modernise their organisations. Prior to joining AWS in 2017, Sarah was in the oil and gas industry for 15 years, holding various roles within software development, mergers and acquisitions, partner and alliances, marketing and business development. She has a breadth of experience in a wide array of environments with a fortunate track record of partnering with customers to deliver results. So thank you very much. Can you join me in welcoming Sarah Bassett? Thank you.
Hey everybody, it's so great to be here, and thanks for the great introduction as well. It's always weird hearing your bio read out to you as you stand there. It's such an honor to be here and be sponsoring this hackathon again this year. And I've heard about this, the statistics around how many teams have signed up and how many problem statements or hypotheses have been put forward, and I just think that's fascinating. I was struggling a bit to think about what would be a relevant topic to bring to this group today. I'm feeling a bit of imposter syndrome, stepping into an industry I'm not intimately familiar with, and certainly not a subject matter expert in, but super passionate around the appetite that surfaced around innovation, leveraging data, bringing diverse teams together to really start to tackle some of the most pressing problems to society. And so I thought I would just talk a little bit about how Amazon thinks about innovation. Not to say that we've got it all figured out by any stretch of the imagination, but more to give you sort of a peek under the hood as to how we continually try to challenge ourselves to experiment, to take risks, to fail fast. Because that actually explains why Amazon as a company has gotten into many different areas of business, many which are unexpected. But more importantly, it speaks to how we are then really invested in coming alongside of initiatives such as this and particular industries here in WA, where we want to learn more, we want to understand more about how you're experimenting, how you're leveraging data, how you're thinking a bit differently. And so I'll just give you a little bit of a peek as to what our culture is, as peculiar as it may seem. And hopefully it starts to create a little bit of curiosity and also just demonstrates that we are very invested into not just supporting this hackathon from a cloud platform perspective, but that we have subject matter experts who really want to get hands-on with you to solve some of the industry problems and think long-term, but deliver results and understanding in the short term. So this is a presentation that we're often asked to give to our customers because a lot of industries, are going through this digital transformation or want to think about disrupting themselves before they're disrupted. So we talk about this quite a bit, and again, with a bunch of humility, right? This is not the only way to innovate. It's just a way to think about innovating. And so one of the first things we share is that across Amazon, no matter what business unit you're thinking about, whether it's the retail side of the business, web services, Prime Video, we've got retail stores now, we have one common mission, and that's to be the Earth's most customer-centric company. Now, it's not rocket science, it's pretty straightforward, but it also for us is very, very specific, and that as we make decisions within our organization, we will put the customer first always and every single time. And the one thing we know about customers or patients or whoever, citizens is that they're always perfectly, wonderfully dissatisfied. They always want more. They always want faster. They always want cheaper. And so we know there's some very durable needs around customers, no matter how you define them and what type of persona they are, that we can continue to innovate against. And so what we do time and time again is we work backwards from the customer. We try to deeply, deeply understand who our customer is. Now, for us in Amazon Web Services, for those of you that are somewhat familiar, maybe not familiar at all, we provide technology solutions. So we might be working with universities, we might be working with large resources companies, we might be working with startups, and they are very much our customer. We're trying to understand what their mission is, what their vision is, what problems they're trying to solve, but we also really intimately want to understand who their end customer is. And so we work relentlessly. We'll spend a pretty disproportionate amount of time just really trying to understand what the customer needs are. There's sort of 4 pillars that we organize around at Amazon. And again, we often share these with customers to try to understand, well, where are you on your journey? I thought, Jonathan gave some great indications of, just recognizing that there is kind of a cultural change maybe that will be going on, whether it's now more of an appetite to dive deep into data and mine data, or more of an appetite to experiment and not have to have success as an outcome early on in a grant proposal. So we know that there's some big cultural headwinds that are going to be facing our customers, and so we talk a lot about this. One of the mantras we have at Amazon is that we hire builders and then we want to let them build. So across our business, we want to allow as much autonomy and freedom for every individual to innovate. And so in order to do that, we have to have some mechanisms in place for people to have that freedom and be successful. And one of the things we do is we have a set of leadership principles by which we effectively define our operating system within our company. We hire against these leadership principles. We reward and review people against these as well. And there's 16 of them, and I won't go through all of them, but I'm sure many of you within your organizations or within your current education institution or your company have a set of values or vision statements that you adhere to. And these are ours. And when I first started with Amazon maybe 4 years ago, I really thought that they were just a nice shiny poster on the wall, that they sounded great, they were written well, but that we would kind of reference them every once in a while. I can tell you that these are referenced on a daily basis. And so they're really our guideposts around how we think about innovation and really hold each other accountable for keeping the customer centric, but also being accountable for innovation. So just one example of one that I wanted to double click on is Invent and Simplify. And I thought it would really resonate with the spirit of this hackathon. And so everyone, first of all, when we talk about leaders, everyone is a leader, not just one by status in terms of management or C-level or VP level. So everyone's a leader within our company. And the idea is that everyone's accountable for seeking out ways to invent and simplify. If you see a problem, if you see an inefficiency, if you see a grievance with the customer, what are you going to do about it? How are you going to take ownership? And how can you make things more efficient and easier? And so that's something that we're always looking for out of our teams. One of the nuances of this particular value statement of ours is that we're willing to be misunderstood for a long period of time. So that means if we deeply understand what our customers, our end customers, our patients, our students are wanting from an experience, and we are very much validated in that point of view and that hypothesis, we will run a series of experiments to inform that strategy, and that way we execute on it might evolve, but we will be very stubborn on the vision and flexible on the details. And for different outside entities such as Wall Street or analysts that kind of assess our behavior sometimes within Amazon, we get a lot of criticism. Why are they going into this area of business? Why are they now a movie studio? Why, if they're the biggest online retailer, are they now opening retail stores, face-to-face retail stores? So if you dig beneath that, it's really because we're very vested in a hypothesis, and we're running experiments, we're gathering data, and we're proving against that strategy as we go. I talked a little bit about how we work backwards from the customer. I think this will be really interesting across the 18 or so teams or challenges that have been given to the teams, is how do you really understand who the end user is of your particular experiment or innovation? Is it a clinician? Is it a patient? Is it administration? And really try to understand what that persona is and what success looks like to them. So we have a really rigorous process around this in Amazon. Sometimes we do it with our customers just to try to, for us, we learn a ton, but it's also just orienting your compass in the right direction. And so we actually create a set of questions that are very straightforward, and we just make sure, again, that we're asking several questions to really challenge ourselves. How well do we know our end user or our end customer? We turn that into an actual written document, and we call it press release frequently asked questions document. We actually date it into the future, so you pick a date where this vision or this idea of how you're going to solve this particular need comes to a reality, and then we orient teams around delivering against that fictional but very data-informed press release. So that's just a bit of a peculiar process that we have within the company. We've seen a lot of our customers take this on as they've looked to strengthen their innovation muscle. And ultimately, this is actually a funding mechanism within our company. So this is the way you get headcount. This is the way you get budget to go and build and deploy something. So it's just a kind of nuanced way to really chart a vision and then build a team to deliver around it. Just a couple more slides. Some other kind of key things that help us move really quickly and leverage the ever-changing landscape of technology is we believe very much in a self-service environment within our company. And really the cloud, for those of you that know a little bit or a lot about it, is really about that. It's really about democratizing access to technology and allowing you to experiment and use that tech with a very low hurdle rate. It will cost you some time and attention, maybe some upskilling, but ultimately we want to democratize the use of the technology and allow that to be used by our builders, but also our customers as well. And with an ever-changing environment that we're in, I think we all can agree, even as consumers ourselves of the latest iPhone or the latest technology, it's a rapidly evolving place. So we want to be able to provide that flexibility, and so people can choose the tool that's right for the job. And then finally, another thing we believe strongly in is again another permutation of how we believe about autonomy and self-service is we create very small teams to be able to take complete ownership of deliverables. I think again this sort of resonates with the spirit of this hackathon as well, right? You'll be converging on a problem. You'll be taking in diverse viewpoints. You'll be accessing subject matter expertise as necessary, but ultimately you'll deliver an outcome as a team. And that's something we believe very strongly in, is that you've got to facilitate that ownership and that autonomy. 2 pizza teams at Amazon mean you'll never have a team bigger than 2 pizzas can feed. I often get asked, is that American-sized pizzas or more disciplined Australian-sized pizzas? It's about 8 to 10 people. And the idea is, I'm sure many of you have worked on different organizational structures or teaming events yourself. It's really to allow them to move quickly and deliver results and then kind of own what they've built. And then finally, some food for thought. I think Jonathan spoke about this a little bit as well. Is the willingness to fail. We do believe that invention or innovation and failure are inseparable twins, and you can't have one without the other. So we strongly believe in creating the possibility for experimentation, and with that usually comes failure, but a lot of learnings. They don't have to be as massive as the ones Amazon has had. We've had some massive failures as an organization. We tried a couple different, not once but 2 times, to get into the online auction retail space. Failed both times. And we also launched a smartphone. I don't know if anyone ever heard of Amazon Fire Phone. I didn't. We know there's apparently hundreds and thousands of them in a warehouse somewhere on the west coast of the U.S. But ultimately, it was deemed a failure. But the story and the anecdotes around that culturally for us is no one on those teams was let go. They were asked to think very deeply about the learnings and the understanding that they gained from that experience. And both of those pretty massive failures, expensive failures, have turned into new business lines and opportunities. We now have Marketplace, which means that over half of our sales online are from third-party sellers, which took a lot of the auction kind of innovation and turned it into something that we could be successful at. And our Fire Phone really focused on the voice assistant, which is Alexa, which is now in all of our smart speakers and devices there. So those team members have lived on. I think Elena's in the back of the room, and Gary and James probably know some of these people. They're still in the company. And so that's just really this, kind of overarching mantra from our leadership all the way down that says it is okay to experiment and it's okay to fail, just also fostering that continuous learning. So I know that was a bit of a drive-by today. I just kind of wanted to plant some seeds as to how we think about innovation, and also hopefully that gives you a little bit of an inside look why we are so passionate about partnering with the organizations that are here today, and really hope to be contributing where we can, however we can, to some of the experimentation that's going to be taking place over the next few weeks. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. So we're just so grateful to Amazon and to Gary and James and the team. Amazon have provided thousands and thousands of dollars of AWS credits, which all of our teams will be using to build their solutions. And then once we pick the winner, they'll be using those same credits and that same infrastructure to build a solution. So it's really enabling our young entrepreneurs and students. Is fantastic. Thank you. I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Kath Resnick. Kath is an entrepreneur with a clinical background as a psychotherapist. Kath co-founded Kinship Systems, an award-winning digital health company to improve the lived journey of patients and carers, providing regulatory-grade, real-world evidence to support clinical trials and population health initiatives. She is currently the founder of Insightful and CEO of Insightful X, a digital health solutions company, and was recently appointed Senior Director, Programs and Health at Australia's leading digital health commercialisation organisation for evidence-based digital health technologies. Can you please join me in welcoming Kath?
Good afternoon, everybody, and I also like to pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Imagine losing the life of a loved one simply because their health data wasn't shared from one provider to another. If you've ever had a family member with complex needs, you'll know that trying to find the right care at the right time for them is incredibly challenging by itself. But then when you do find the right providers, you're often repeating the same information over and over again to each new provider, and more often than not undertaking the same tests more than once. The challenge is that your life-saving health data is trapped in silos, often unused. Now, this is a global problem, and it's understood that between misdiagnosis, over-servicing, repeated tests and medical errors, it can cost our respective healthcare systems up to 30% of overall healthcare expenditure. Now, in Australia alone, that would translate to $60 billion a year. Clearly a problem worth solving. But more challenging than that is that in 2016 we lost 27,000 lives simply because of medication errors, primarily to do with where you've got where you've got sort of medication errors that could have been prevented from that data sharing. Now that's potentially your life or the life of someone you love that was lost unnecessarily. This is not something that, when we found this out, Kinship Systems, we were really comfortable in sitting with, and so we set about to solve that problem. We understood that as a startup we were never going to break down all the institutional silos that had already been built, but what we did understand was that there was a common element between all of them, and that was you, the consumer or the patient. And technically you were the only person that could actually share that data between silos, but the process to do that had up until that point been incredibly challenging. So we created a platform that allowed you to store health, care and wellness information all in one place and securely share that information with anyone in your care team. But we didn't just stop around the data, we decided to actually create insights out of that data and provide you health insights and connections to care that were relevant to your specific needs, and then use machine learning as a way of potentially linking you to clinical trials that might be relevant to you. All sounds pretty wonderful. Sounds like we could, change the world, and really thought that we could. In fact, the solution even looked pretty amazing, and we had fantastic user experience. We co-designed with government, it was fully interoperable, it met all the healthcare and security standards that you would expect. We did a lot of consultation on it, and it was built so that it was regulatory grade real-world evidence that could support clinical trials as well. And then with your consent, aggregate and de-identify that data at a population level for population health research. So clearly we haven't changed the world, and clearly it's not in every one of your hands right now. So what went wrong? A lot. And so part of what I want to speak to you today is some of the challenges in innovating in health and what we can actually do to change that. And I'm happy to say it goes very much along the lines with what Jonathan and Sarah were also speaking about. So the healthcare system is extremely complex. Just looking at this image, you can see that there's an incredible number of stakeholders that are engaged in any one sort of lot of clinical events or any one patient journey. There's a lot of stakeholders that needed to be navigated. But you know what? We did our research. We did all the consultations. We engaged with every one of those stakeholders that were, important to the journey, and we spent time with them to understand what their challenges were. So the problem wasn't actually the complexity of the healthcare system. That's a problem you can solve. Maybe it was regulation. There's certainly a lot of regulation in the healthcare sector. Now, in the days when we first started, digital health was a very new industry, and there wasn't the regulations that there are around now. The TGA has just released some guidance around software as a medical device, and that's the case internationally as well. But we certainly did have security requirements and privacy requirements, and this, just to give you an indication, is some of the privacy requirements around the data of My Health Record. And that's not counting the state level requirements, and nor is it counting the global requirements we're also needing to abide by. But again, that was a problem that was solvable. Maybe it was the funding. This is a guide as to all the different pockets of money that need to fund all the different elements of the healthcare solution, or wherever you are in the patient journey. And as you can see, there's a mix of federal and state and insurer and private and even employers in there. And so when you're developing a solution for the healthcare sector, you've also got to look at who's going to pay. Because for it to be sustainable, somebody has to pay for it somewhere along the line, and it isn't easy to navigate that space. But if you work hard enough and you do your consultations and you do your testing and you're experimenting, as we've heard a lot about, you can eventually find a payer that's willing to pay for your solution. But you know what? That wasn't the problem either. See, the problem is not about technology, it's not about regulation, and it's not about data. It's actually about people. It's people who innovate, it's people who change, and it's people who can champion your solution. Because at the end of the day, even if you've got like the Minister of Health that's championing your solution, or the CEO of the health department, there's somebody in the procurement department or somebody in finance whose job's on the line if they get it wrong. And that's a very human condition. When it comes to investors and funders, No one likes to feel uncomfortable. No one likes to look stupid. And as you would have heard, our solution would have actually required a lot of money to get it up and running and to do everything we needed to put in place the privacy and the security and make it scalable and extensible. And it did require a lot of funds. But digital health was a new space. If you're innovating, it's new. It's not an established pathway. People aren't familiar with it. They don't know what it looks like. They don't know what it feels like. And they don't know how to manage their risk. And if it's something that they're not comfortable with, if it's not resources or medtech or pharma where there's established commercialisation pathways, then it makes them feel uncomfortable. It makes them feel like it's not something that they can easily contribute to. So they'd rather invest their money somewhere else. When it comes to our customers, the challenge in procurement in health especially is that the incentives are misaligned. Why would we spend money over here when you're saving money for the other department over there? Why would I put my job on the line and hire a startup to do this job? Which, you know, I'll lose my job if it doesn't work out. When if I hire a big four consulting firm over here for 4 times the amount of money, if they fail, at least my job's secure. So again, it's about people. It's about people taking risks. It's about people wanting to sort of take that next step and to be able to champion innovation. And then you have frontline staff who actually have to use the solution. We already know that they're under the pump, they're under-resourced, they're at capacity. Their workflow is already incredibly challenged. One extra click for them to do might be one extra click too far. They lack the time, and often they lack the incentive because it's easier to do what you already understand. And then there's digital literacy. My profession, psychotherapists, are probably the worst. Most of my colleagues barely know how to use their smartphone, and certainly not use an electronic health record. But even for those that are extraordinarily digitally literate, every new technology has a learning curve. And if you're already under the pump, sometimes that's just a little bit step too far. So that's all the bad news. But how do we innovate in health? Well, it really does start with you, and I would like to share just a little anecdote of some of my other work in consulting to high-growth companies, and especially entrepreneurial companies. And we've heard how Amazon does it, and frankly, it's a very similar process to that. I often get called into companies where you've got a really inspiring entrepreneur at the helm who has this amazing vision of something that they want to achieve. And the executive team or the people that need to implement it go, but it can't be done. We can't do that because of X, Y, Z. It happens all the time. But from the entrepreneur's point of view, it's a fully formed vision. They can see it, touch it, feel it. They know it's possible. And what I ask you to do in whatever role you're in, whether you're in an administrative role, whether you're a consumer, whether you're a patient, whether you're an innovator, whether you're a funder, you all have a role. And if you can put yourself in the shoes of that innovator, of that entrepreneur, and you can see and touch and feel and experience what it's like to have success, and then you look back and you go, how did I solve those problems? How did I solve that risk or mitigate that risk? How did I deal with that probity issue? And without exception, that little tool, that little Jedi mind trick is an amazing way of actually tricking your brain into knowing that there is a solution there and finding one. And that's the power of what Sarah sort of walked us through in terms of having that press release, like talking about what's already been done. It's an incredibly powerful tool, and every one of you can do that in your role. And so I'd really like to encourage you to understand that innovation starts with you, wherever you are in your journey. Whether you're a student and whether you're a CEO, it's up to you to champion innovation in whichever role you find yourself in. Start with what success looks like and work backwards from there. And just at that point you're about to say, but it can't be done because of this, change that word but to and. Yes, and if we were to achieve it, this is how we would go about it. If you're not necessarily the most innovative person yourself and don't necessarily feel comfortable and champion innovation in your organisation, or you do feel your job's on the line, Find someone who is willing to champion innovation. So when an innovator comes to you and says, I have an idea for X, be honest and just say, I'm not the right person to speak to, but I'd love to introduce you to somebody over here. Because they are. And then when you do get asked for feedback, be constructive in that feedback. Say, I love your idea, there is a challenge with it and you might want to consider X. That's how we innovate, that's how we take risks, and that's how we move the needle forward. Because innovating in health is difficult. It is also possible. And so I really would love to leave you with the question of, how might we all work together to innovate health? How might we? Thank you.
Thanks so much, Kath. And I hope that some of the participants are listening to that. We are looking for you to take a risk, to put something forward and really produce something. We're not looking for a recommendation that a report be produced or something like that. We're looking for real solutions. So thanks so much, Kath. Okay, I'd just like to introduce our final speakers, Andrew Bell and Nick Gajanda. Andrew has a background in energy economics, working across West Australia and internationally in energy resources and research sectors since 2010. So Andrew joined Curtin University in 2016, working in the research office, connecting industry with Curtin's research capabilities to solve complex challenges and develop mutually beneficial partnerships. In his current role as Executive Manager of the Innovation Central Perth, Andrew leads a team to support digital disruption across different sectors in WA. Now, I don't have a bio for Nick, so I'd ask you both to come up and introduce yourself. But please join me in welcoming Andrew and Nick to the stage. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, everybody, for the opportunity to present Innovation Central Perth. So we're co-located with the WA Data Science Innovation Hub on campus at Curtin. And Innovation Central Perth is part of the Curtin-Cisco partnership. So there's several elements to that, and I think it's a really great achievement for both the university but Western Australia in general, to be able to attract this international investment into Curtin University, but WA, and I guess kudos, we've got AWS here today. It's a recognition to the state of the resources and the potential that we have here. So the whole concept of Innovation Central Perth is about digitising, analysing, optimising, and then automating processes. The real strength of Innovation Central Perth is its model. So we've got a Cisco engineer, which is Cisco funded, sitting on campus to support our projects. We've also got one resource from the Curtin Institute for Computation, and that's a data scientist to be able to also help us guide and unlock challenges once we actually have these demand-driven problems presented to us. We've got full access to the university's research potential, so we've got, I think, more than 2,500 researchers on campus. We work across the Curtin Health Sciences, but also bringing in different elements of the research, the researchers within the university to that, and the prototyping equipment. So again, through Cisco's investment in Innovation Central Perth, Curtin's investment through using labs, and then the last one here is using the campus as a test site. So the university is 116 hectares. It's risk-loving rather than risk-averse, which is really critical when you're looking at innovation in conservative industry. So we'll actually set up trials on campus, prove projects up to a certain point, and then operationalise them. And the last but most important element to Innovation Central Perth is every project that we run, we actually have a student intern working on that project. So this is critical for, I guess, future-proofing industry, producing workforce-ready graduates, and at the same time having the ability for industry to see a talent pipeline coming from that, while seeing real case scenarios solved. So we operate across all industries, and I guess the intention here is the fact that data science connectivity is a growing area across all industries. Solving problems in isolation is not efficient, and the ability of the team to be able to take projects from different industries into new applied problems across other sectors. We're seeing this actually translated into curriculum as well. Mining, obviously, Western Australia is a hotspot for digital innovation, and what we're trying to do here is to take that into different sectors, including health. So we are a membership-based entity. We basically want challenges to come to us from industry so that we can deploy the team to be able to, take these big risks, prove up whether something's possible or potentially whether it's not possible. And if it's not possible, running that through a student project in a short amount of time saves potentially a lot of resources to be able to do that. So I think at this point I'm going to hand over to Nick, who's one of ICP's interns, and he's going to do a bit of a deep dive into one of the projects that he did last summer.
Thanks, Andrew. Hey guys, my name is Nick. I'm actually studying at Curtin University right now, and I'm also working with ICP on a part-time basis. So my project was with the South Metro Health Services and based at Fiona Stanley Hospital. So my project was the e-consent. So firstly, what is e-consent? So basically when a patient comes in, it's an outpatient, they need to sign a consent form. And that consent form gets put into the patient pack, which is kept at the pack. From there, on the day of the surgery, the patient pack is actually brought forward and the consent form is checked with the patient as well. But what happens is that over 25% of those consent forms go missing. And where do they go missing? It's from the outpatients signing the consent form and also from moving from the patient pack to the holding bay. And what does that mean exactly? Well, you're wasting patient time, theater time, and patient time, and the clinician time as well. And that is huge, especially if you're thinking about a surgery room that is ready. It costs about $30 to $80 a minute if you're wasting the time of the theater room. So how big is the problem? So we had a chat with the clinicians at Fiona Stanley, and over 70% of them had to reconsent a patient over the past year. Now, we also observed patients being consented, and also had a chat with the Consumer Advisory Council. And what was said, like I mentioned before, 25% of the consent forms will actually go missing. Clinicians actually want something that goes directly to the BOSNet, which is where they store all the clinicians' patient data. And they want to be able to use it in the external private rooms. What was the proposed solutions? First of all, we came up with an idea of maybe a BOSNet e-form, which could be used on an iPad, for example. Unfortunately, because due to the intranet rules and regulations around the patient data, we could not use that. So what we came up with is a mobile app that could be used on a clinician's personal phone. That could be Android or Apple. And that was developed in-house with the development team. So now, what did that do? Well, basically, you could actually scan a patient's wristband, which has a barcode on it, and that brings up directly the patient's data on a personal clinician's phone. You can consent the patient directly on the phone itself, and you can get them to sign it on the spot. Once signed, the consent is sent directly to BOSNet and can be retrieved on the day of surgery. Unfortunately, we had big issues around awareness of the app once it was launched. And there was also some issues raised in terms of infection control risk. And there was not really much experience in terms of tech using for the consenting, and also a lot of privacy concerns. So we had to go back to drawing board, and we came up with ideas of how to properly educate clinicians on how to use it better. We came up with an e-consent video, and we were so lucky to have a person like Fiona Wood, who is a past Australian of the Year, to endorse our app and actually come forward and say, please use this app. And we also came up with digital posters and an SMS campaign that was sent to all clinicians in WA. We worked closely with the social media teams to actually show the app across all social media. And I also ran live demos with each specialty. And yep, so if you are a clinician right now, you can actually scan the QR code to view the app and use it today. And if you have any other questions, you can feel free to reach out to Mark Morgan, who's the main lead on this project, or myself at Curtin. Yeah. And lastly, thank you so much, guys. If you have any questions for ICP, always please reach out to Andrew. Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thanks very much, Andrew and Nick. That was great. So just before we go into a bit of a Q&A, I probably should have done this at the start, but my name is Alex Jenkins. So I'm the current director of the WA Data Science Innovation Hub. Now, I also wanted to introduce Kate McGilvray. So where is Kate? Kate, do you want to stand up and give everyone a wave? So Kate's done all the hard work for organising this hackathon. Can we just give Kate a round of applause? So if anyone does have specific questions about the hackathon, please come to myself or come to Kate, because I'll probably just direct you to Kate. But Kate's done an amazing job, and I just wanted to acknowledge the effort. Thanks, Kate. And can we acknowledge Alicia Fairbank as well up the back there? So Alicia's done an amazing job organising the event, and thank you again to all our speakers. I'd like to invite the speakers to come up so we can just have a quick Q&A session. I can start. What would you guys like to see in terms of the types of solutions from our participants? So we've got all kinds of challenges. What are the kind of things that you'd like to see? Remember, we're not necessarily just after a piece of software. It can be a presentation or a pitch. What are the kinds of things that would impress you from our participants at the hackathon? That's for everyone.
Sure. So to kick off, I guess the most important thing for something like a hackathon is to be brave, be bold. It's the best use of everybody's time if we do really kind of think outside of the box rather than just sticking with the status quo.
And I think sometimes it's often the simplest solution that's often the best. Not necessarily race to a data solution or a technology solution or something like that. I think there was something that was published on a social media feed just this week around improving outcomes for emergency patients by simply having their bloods taken while they're in the ambulance rather than waiting until they got to the emergency room. That saves 30 minutes of treatment time and potentially lives. Like even just something about innovating in the process rather than necessarily the technology or the data.
Yeah, I guess I'd just add to that some of the things that we kind of said similarly were, have a really bold vision. So one of our customers, I'll just steal their kind of tagline, which is, think big, start small, scale fast. So if you've got a really bold vision as a team, but you've got something kind of incremental to show at first that really contributes to that bigger vision, I think that would be fascinating to see, but don't abandon the big thinking just to deliver something in the short term. And I love the idea of just really marrying up, the digital challenge, the data challenge with a human element, like really deeply understanding what the impact is to the end, patient experience or the clinician's experience.
What they said.
Eli Simic from UWA. I was just interested, considering it's in the health domain and it's got a lot of pretty hectic ramifications for patients and such, how important is the model interpretability? With a lot of the deep learning models, they're quite black box in a way, and you can't interpret maybe why the model's acting in a certain way. So how important is being able to interpret the model and why it's coming to these conclusions?
It's all a learning space, but at the point at which you want to go to market, digital health is being regulated now. So the minute you start looking at things for diagnosis, assessment, treatment, where there's a clinical outcome that's being suggested or you're representing a clinical outcome on the basis of your work, it has to go through the same type of clinical trials as any type of therapeutic. And that would mean disclosing the sort of black box stuff in the back, how you actually came to those assumptions. So look at the TGA's guidance now on software as a medical device. And if the work you're doing with that data in the back contributes to that, it's very likely that's going to need to be disclosed.
I'd like to invite everyone to hang around for a lunch and some networking, and thanks again to all our speakers, all our supporters and all the partners for the hackathon. Thank you.